Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Planet IT and Sophos MDR quarterly update for Q1 2025. Sounds weird saying that still. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say 2025 before I actually start believing it is 2025. And thanks for giving up some of your time today to go through this. As always, I'm going to keep what I have to say short and sweet and let the experts talk. So without further ado, I suppose, joining me today is Stephen McKay. Stephen, I'll let you introduce yourself rather than me butchering it.
Yeah, thanks, James. As you see on screen, I'm a product manager here at Sophos. Been at Sophos 11 plus years, looking after our endpoint and security operations products.
Well, I'm glad that you've joined us today, and I'm looking forward to what we've got to talk about. It's always nice with these updates to be able to bring different voices from around Sophos to all of the Sophos customers that we have that have taken up the MDR service with us. As always, all of you know who we are at Planet, but we are that one-stop shop for all things IT. So if there's anything you need outside of Sophos, you know where to come to. Give your account manager a shout, or you can always reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. And we always say this: we are a trusted partner for so many organizations. One day this slide's going to have too many logos and going to be too small to show people, but it's always nice to see, and I'm sure some of you will recognize your logos on the screen. As always with these webinars, we do have the Q&A function enabled. So if you do have questions, best thing to do is to use a Q&A function rather than the chat. Just drop in your questions into the Q&A. It will come through. I'll be able to view the questions. And then what I can do is then towards the end, I will pose those questions to Stephen. It means I can take out any kind of business sensitive information that you may have accidentally put in there. It doesn't just go straight to everyone. So yeah, do feel free to use that. It's along the top bar, and say any questions you do have, drop them in. There's no such thing. There's not such thing as a silly question, and I will put them all to Stephen towards the end. So I suppose without further ado, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Stephen, and I'll be quiet for a bit.
Thanks, James. So yeah, talking about that logo slide, if you do run out of space, as a Knox County fan, feel free to remove the Forest logo. Just double check, you can see my screen correctly, James?
Yeah, I can see that. Looks all good.
Great, thank you ever so much. And yeah, I'll just add my welcome to all of you. Thank you for giving up your time on a Tuesday to come and listen to this update. Reiterate what James said, use the Q&A function. If there's a topic I'm not talking about that you've got questions or interest in, please do ask it, and I'll do my best to answer it for you. So the first thing just to talk about, maybe you've seen this already, back in October, Sophos announced its intent to acquire Secureworks, and I'm pleased to announce that if you didn't already see that yesterday, we did actually close that. So we have completed the acquisition of Secureworks. So I'm sure many of you are wondering what that means for you. Well, first of all, it really makes the future bright for Sophos. Sophos and Secureworks together now has far and away the largest pure play cybersecurity provider of managed detection and response. So 30,000 plus organizations of all sizes worldwide rely on Sophos Secureworks for their managed detection and response. This partnership now allows us to further innovate the security solutions we come out with. So we'll talk a little bit today about managed risk. We'll talk again about the integrations we offer. Both of these just get strengthened, expanded by this partnership that we've got. And as I talked about expanded opportunities, over time, the go-to-market will be fully integrated across Sophos and Secureworks. In the immediate term, the teams are busy behind the scenes looking at what that integration means and doing the planning. So in the near term, our commitment is focused on the MDR product that you know and love, but we will keep you updated with further enhancements as we close out this financial year for Sophos, ending at the end of March, and as we move into our next financial year. As I say, I'm sure we'll be back together with the team at Planet IT to update you on new roadmaps, etc., in due course, so stay tuned for that. So I mentioned integrations. I do like to throw up this slide. You may have seen it before, so we won't spend too long on it. A few points to just re-emphasize if you are familiar with it. The first thing is, it's expansive integration. Secureworks brings a raft of further integrations again. We're always looking at both the breadth of the categories we offer, so backup and recovery. I keep saying that's new. It's not that new anymore, but it's our latest category. And then the depth of logos within each category. So you'll see Rubrik, for example, added in backup and recovery, a number of new additions of logos in the network area. And if you sat there thinking that's great, but they've not got the logo of a vendor that I rely on in one of these categories, please do reach out to the Sophos team. We're always more than happy to work with you to get these logos added. There's two main ways we do it. One is we build out the integration ourselves because we think it's a vendor that's got good traction in the space they're in and is well positioned to support our existing customer base. The other is through requests from customers like yourselves. The other thing to talk about on this slide, just a reminder, I'm sure all of the Sophos integrations are included in your MDR license. So if you already have Sophos Mobile, we will be ingesting that telemetry into the data lake, and the team will be using that telemetry in order to make sure that you are secure. When we look at the third-party integrations, the Microsoft and Google integrations you can see here are included in your base license. So if you haven't already, my main call to action for you today is go and make sure you're configuring your M365 environments so they're integrated into Sophos Central or your Google Workspace environments. If you're not using the Sophos Endpoint Agent, you also get the endpoint products integrated as part of your license as well. The importance of having that EDR telemetry is so critical that that is included. For the others, they're add-on packs that you can purchase alongside the data retention pack. Again, just a point of clarification, you buy for the category, not the logo. So if you look at the firewall and think that's great, but I have Palo and Fortinet, if you buy the firewall integration pack, we're not bothered which vendors they're in that you use. We just ingest the data as part of that firewall integration. Really quickly skip over this. What this means, and you'll see in the examples I've got to show in a minute, is that we get event sources across the attack surface, across the threat landscape, through the data lake, through our threat intelligence from the Sophos XOps team that I'll talk about later on, through automated response, etc. We're able to not only collect, but importantly, contextualize and correlate these event sources so that they're fed through to the MDR team to allow for proactive threat hunting, reactive threat investigation, and swift response. So we're thinking about the mean time to investigate and respond when we get this telemetry in. And this goes into the XDR platform. So for those customers that want to self-manage, it's exactly the same experience, but you do not have the expertise of the Sophos team behind you supporting you. Let's come back to the productivity categories of Microsoft and Google. This slide is probably dated now. It's probably more than 25,000, but these two categories are far and away the most used integrations, and for good reason. One, as I've said, they're included in the base license. Two, the prevalence of these two vendors in your environments and the importance. If we think about Microsoft and Microsoft 365, business email compromise, phishing activity, user impersonation, adversary in the middle attacks, all of that information and insight comes from integrating those vendors and the telemetry from them into the XDR data lake for the Sophos team, Sophos MDR team to look at. So a reminder, if you don't already, go away and have a look at those integrations. Now, this is fairly new. You may not have seen these examples before, but I do want to spend a few minutes going through what does it mean if you do integrate these additional integrations into Sophos Central, and what can the MDR team do with them? So the first example, I mentioned it a moment ago, adversary in the middle attack. So I won't read the slide in great detail, but in essence, this was a phishing email in which the user was sent to a fake login page. So they believe that they're logging into a company portal. They input their credentials. That's then collected by the attacker. The attacker is also able to get hold of that session token for M365. So they now have both the credentials and a valid session token. With those two things, the attacker is able to log on to the M365 portal. They know the URL, they know the credentials and the company of which they've taken those credentials. So they're now able to get into the organization's Microsoft environment. And in this example, you can see they actually modify a calendar invitation. So that was the background, that's the activity. The detection came a short time later. This is a rule that we have. So Sophos looks at the event telemetry coming from Microsoft and has a large number, over 1,000 proprietary detection rules. In this example, a proprietary rule detected a user agent string that was suspicious. And this indicated a potential adversary in the middle attack. Now, what that means is we looked at the telemetry coming from the logons to that portal.office.com site and triggered a detection that in itself triggered a case to the MDR team that said, this activity requires further investigation. So different to our classic endpoint, we know something's bad and we kill the process or we roll back affected files for a ransomware attack. This requires a skilled analyst to go and investigate the suspicious activity, or potentially, I should say, suspicious activity. That then triggers an investigation. And what you'll see is 2 minutes from when we identified that activity through the threat detection and when the investigation kicked off. So 12:30 UTC. Because of the integration of Microsoft, the team has the logs needed to go and review the activity around the Microsoft Entra ID logon activity. Now, we know enough context about the organization and the impacted user to know that they're based in the UK, and we're able to geolocate those logins from the audit logs we collect from Microsoft to identify that they are coming from different countries. So that then gives us an indication that this threat detection, this suspicious activity, is likely to be malicious activity. As a result of that, we go and look at any recent changes within the environment, and this leads the analyst to detect that a modification has been made within that user's calendar by the attacker. And then finally, not quite 2.5 hours later, the case is closed. This is where we work with the organization and we send recommendations. So the recommendations in this instance were, of course, to block that email sender to prevent the same phishing email being sent to anyone else in the organization. We reset the user's compromised credentials. Now, it doesn't say it here, but I know they did it. They also removed the session tokens from that user as well. And then this is where we then go on to recommend further preventative steps. So within Microsoft, there's the ability to set up conditional access policies, and this helps lock down specific employees to geolocations. Now, you can do this in a way that it would just be further signal in future. So if someone logged on from a geolocation that they wouldn't normally, that's a good indicator that there might be something to investigate. And then, of course, we ensure that no other users have been targeted in the same attack. Next one, this is, I find this one super interesting, so I hope you do too. This is a proactive threat hunt. Now, we know, and the threat landscape is aware, or we are aware within the threat landscape, I should say, that IT workers are being sent by North Korea to get jobs in Western organizations, as you see here, tech sector specifically, and just work away until they're needed. So towards the end of 24, we conducted this proactive threat hunt relating to a known Korean threat group in order to see if there was any activity of these fake IT workers within organizations that use Sophos MDR. In this one example, we identified that there was a user persistently logging in using suspicious VPN that wasn't used by anyone else in the organization. So again, if you think back to the first example, we don't yet have enough confidence to say that this is definitely bad, but we're now looking at very suspicious activity. Someone's regularly using a VPN that no one else in the organization is using. And again, it doesn't go into the detail here. We believe that what actually happened and helped the MDR team in this example is that fake worker forgot to log in via a proxy on just one occasion. And what that meant is it pinged up showing the aforementioned conditional access policy. This customer was using conditional access policies, and it identified that the user had logged in from Russia, which they usually didn't do. Usually they're coming in from a proxy, and it was showing that they were logging in from, I believe it was Germany. They'd been posing as this remote software developer for about 6 months. So it shows how long they'd been gone unnoticed. Using a VPN, logging in via a proxy, so their conditional access policy wasn't triggering. Now, we investigated that threat actor's emails and identified that the user had actually gained highly privileged access within AWS. And you can see the timestamps here, but we immediately got in touch with the customer, recommended how to prevent access, disabled the user account, restricted access from that VPN, restricted the IP addresses that we'd identified that remote worker, that adversary was logging in from, and ensured that the credentials used within those AWS environments that it had been accessing had been updated and changed. So I think a really interesting example there of how adversaries are becoming even more smart, how they're persisting for long periods of time, 6 months that remote worker was posing for, just to surreptitiously and slowly gain more and more access. And if we'd not caught them then, you can well imagine that it wouldn't have been long before they'd have launched their attack. And the final one, slightly different one, this is Mimecast. So customers integrated, email integrations with Sophos. They've integrated their Mimecast alerts, and we see here that the activity was a targeted spear phishing email containing a malicious URL. So in this example, as expected, Mimecast would detect that. It's a suspicious URL. We receive that and then raise a detection that causes a case. So in this example, the MDR team have got that case, and on the one hand, it's fairly straightforward. It's a phishing email. It's a suspicious URL. But because we have additional information from the endpoint, we've got network, process, file system activities. We can correlate that data with other data across the entire estate. There's additional context that we extract from the emails. We're actually able to go and identify beyond what Mimecast said, that in this example, that suspicious URL was accessed via the web browser, in this case Edge, and that the user did download a suspicious PDF. They had removed it, but we were able, with all the other information we collect as part of the integrations and the endpoint itself, we're able to get a lot more context and correlate that data to identify the full attack chain from beginning to end. We also went and made sure that that email was removed from the inbox and wasn't available, wasn't sent to any other users in the organization. And then obvious next steps around, blocking that sender's email address and removing any other emails that sender had sent to the organization. So I'll pause there. We do regularly have these MDR cases that we share. Hopefully, you can type in the Q&A, but hopefully you agree that that's an interesting way in which you as customers can see how the MDR team is using the different data that we collect in order to identify suspicious activity that then become incidents that we see through to resolution. The next update I wanted to share was around Sophos Managed Risk. So here's a stat from our 2024 Sophos ransomware report. If you don't already, if other colleagues at Sophos haven't already mentioned to you, news.sophos.com is a great resource for those of you interested in cybersecurity, for those of you that want to read more about interesting threats that we've seen. The Pacific Rim report, I'll touch on later on, but that's a really interesting read that's available for people to look at. We also publish the state of ransomware reports each year and active adversary reports each year. Again, really interesting data to read through. It can be broken down by specific verticals. So if you're in healthcare and you want to understand how ransomware attacks have looked in the previous year specific to healthcare, you can do that. For this, the key takeaway is nearly a third of ransomware attacks start with an exploited and unpatched vulnerability. So managed risk is all about understanding your attack surface, whether that's external or internal, prioritizing the risks that we see, scoring them, and then working through to reduce that attack surface and secure it from in a preventative manner. This slide's almost certainly repeating what I've just said. If you weren't aware, this is a partnership we have with Tenable, so it's powered by Tenable. It's important at Sophos that we're using market-leading partners for this, and Tenable are exactly that. But it's managed by the Sophos managed services team, so you're getting that additional insight. You're getting that 24/7 partnership and collaboration with the Sophos MDR team. So first of all, mitigate risk by knowing what you own. The first thing we will do is there is an onboarding and baselining session in which we understand and work with you to understand exactly what you own. This example is looking at external attack surface management. I witnessed one of the early onboarding calls. Those of you that remember the old on-premise Exchange servers used to spin up the Outlook web portal. And that would allow, if you configured it, that would allow users to log on from home and get their webmail. So we identified there was an external IP address linked to Exchange with a customer that was doing their onboarding session. They weren't aware that it was publicly accessible. They weren't aware it was there. The most telling part of the conversation then was that they were responsible for email at the organization. They didn't know that Exchange was still available and configured, and they had worked there for, I think it was 10 plus years. So really eye-opening when you go through and actually go and look at what is exposed externally. It's often more than you anticipate. I already touched on this. Extend your team with vulnerability experts. So it's one thing, go and get Tenable yourselves and run it, but what do you do with the data that comes out? And this is where the MDR and managed risk teams become a huge benefit, is experts that will help go through, help you understand and prioritize those for you. So step 3, prioritize those vulnerabilities. It's not just a case of everything's bad, go and close it down. What's the most pressing risk? How are we prioritizing? How do you address them? And then finally, how do you do that in an ongoing fashion? So yes, you could do that and have a point in time. You can say, I've run that external attack surface test. I've seen all my vulnerabilities, and over the next few months, I'm going to work through them from the most severe down to the least severe in order. Thank you very much for all your help. The problem is this is an ongoing thing. So at a regular cadence, you need to recheck those assets. You need to reprioritize the vulnerabilities. Something that was a low vulnerability in January, suddenly there is a public exploit published for it, and that jumps it up to a critical vulnerability that we need to prioritize and patch urgently. Shift gears now onto AI. So those of you with your bingo cards out that wondered when I would talk about generative AI, you don't have to wait too long. The reason we're talking more about AI in general rather than Gen AI is because this is not new. So as you can see on this slide, at Sophos, we acquired back in 2017 Invincia, and that's when we first started leveraging artificial intelligence to help us in our battle against adversaries, helped us with our zero-day malware detection, URL classification, Android malware detection on mobile devices, etc. Why do we leverage AI? So the first thing to talk about is how we empower our security analysts. So if you combine AI, whether that's generative or otherwise, with Sophos expertise, it accelerates our security outcomes. So think about machine learning in Sophos labs in our XOps organization, being able to more quickly identify those malicious threats and then validate them with threat hunter expertise allows us to put out through detection engineering new detection rules, new protection rules at a regular cadence. And you can see that 50 plus advanced models fully embedded across the portfolio, whether it's a firewall, whether it's Sophos email, Sophos endpoint. We've got a myriad of AI models that are aiming to neutralize those adversaries faster. Why is that important? The quicker we can identify the threat, the quicker the analyst can investigate, the quicker we can respond. If you think back to those MDR examples, the earlier we identify a threat, one of our recommendations for that second example was to create a conditional access rule. That would have been an earlier indicator of that user logging in from a geolocation that they normally wouldn't have logged in from. And then operate with confidence. You may have seen and read in the press about AI and whether or not it can be proven out. So we have a virtuous cycle. You'll see I have a slide on it in a moment. But the fact that these AI models and generative AI is being used across the complete Sophos customer base, 600,000 plus customers, tens of millions of endpoints, hundreds of thousands of firewalls, etc. It's battle proven across breadth and depth of customer, from size, from verticals, etc. There are some example use cases. I won't run through them all. I'll pick one from each. So if we think about prevention and attack surface, we leverage Tenable's vulnerability priority rating artificial intelligence engine in order to prioritize those risks we just talked about in managed risk. On the endpoint itself, we use deep learning neural network technology to identify zero-day threats. So before we've been able to write a signature, a behavioral rule, or identify a threat in the wild, we use the complex deep learning models to identify these never seen before attacks. And then finally, and the one I'll go into a bit more detail, is how we use generative AI within security operations. And we think about the investigation response that we've just talked a lot about. So going back to the first point I made, empowering our security analysts. So within the Sophos MDR team, generative AI can make and empower our team to be more efficient with some of the regular tasks they run. It can help them more quickly investigate and therefore more quickly respond to threats that we see. When we thought about using Gen AI within Sophos, we really broke this down into 3 phases. So I'll give an example from each. So in phase 1, which is already available, the AI case summarization. So think back to those MDR examples. When a case is created, all related detections to that case get added to a case. Historically, an analyst would open a case and they'd look through the detections to try and understand what was going on. A detection might say that there's a command and control IP address that's been accessed. It might show there's a phishing email, etc. As a SOC analyst, I need to get myself into the mindset to understand what is it that I'm really investigating, and that takes time. The AI case summarization allows for the automatic creation of a plain language summary that will just allow an analyst to very quickly read and say, we identified an attempt to steal users' credentials from Stephen's laptop. We then also saw an attempt to connect to domain controller 1 by user server_admin. As a SOC analyst, I'm already now in the mindset of, this is credential theft. These are the 2 assets that have been targeted. It looks like the adversary is trying to move across the network. I'm now going to go and investigate the user server_admin, the command and control IP address that's been identified, and those 2 devices. It empowers me to more quickly investigate and respond. In phase 2, it's still human driven, but the LLM, the generative AI models, are now doing more of the work on our behalf. So I'm now investigating that case of credential theft. If I have an interactive model, I can say to it, go and identify if the IP address, the command and control IP address, has been accessed by any other devices in my environment. That's a fairly simple thing for Gen AI to do. It goes to create a query for the data lake to say, has any other device accessed this IP address, whatever the IP address is. Whilst that's been done, I can go off as an analyst and go and do more complex things. When it's ready, the interactive assistant comes back and says, no one else has tried to access that IP address. I can then add that information into my investigation note summary and then go and ask the large language model whether or not that user server_admin has logged on to any other devices in the last 7 days. Again, whilst that's off going to answer that question, I can be taking preventative steps. I can isolate those devices from the network. I can go and reset the credentials for server_admin. I can go and revoke session tokens. I can reduce the blast radius whilst the assistant is going to collect more information for me. And then phase 3 in the future, autonomous. This idea that you've got artificial intelligence continuously doing the proactive threat hunting, looking for anomaly detections where users are logging in from different geo IP locations. So they become an extension to our SOC team and actually do a lot of the triaging and initial investigation before it's handed over to a seasoned human expert for further investigation and response. I won't read through this slide, but this is an example you can see on the screenshot of a summary that's been written by generative AI and the 4 different capabilities that we've put into the product and the service to empower those analysts, as I've just talked about. Now, I've mentioned XOps and labs a few times, just a few more minutes and I'll hand over to you all for questions. So this virtuous cycle. So we've got, starting at 9 o'clock here, the Sophos Labs researchers. This is a team that go and analyze files, behaviors, indicators of compromise, etc., in order to continually keep our products at the cutting edge of both protection and detection. We then share those queries and tools from our threat hunting teams, from the honeypots we've got set up, from our own IT team, from our MDR team, back into the labs team for further research. So if they see things from the front line that maybe we've not picked up, it then comes back into Sophos Labs.
Stephen, I don't think your slides move forward. I think it's still on the general. Yeah, it's done it now. It's caught up.
Oh,
okay,
right.
Good. It's all good.
No, the MDR analyst team. So I talked in the example of that fake worker from North Korea. You know, they're doing proactive threat hunts where they see indicators, new methods, and in the wild impacts. Again, it's fed back to make our products and services more robust in the future. I just talked a lot about artificial intelligence. The AI team across Sophos is looking at how we can further enhance the machine learning models we use, how we can build more automation into the products and services, again, just to feed through that virtuous cycle. And then finally, it's about awareness. So I gave you all that call to action to go to news.sophos.com. One of the key things is about how we share the insight that we get with you as customers, with our partners, and more widely, the cybersecurity community, to ensure that we all move ahead. I'll reference again the Pacific Rim report, 5-year investigation that the team did. The write-up on that from the threat communications team was superb. It's industry leading and helps us all understand how we need to continue a secure by design practice when we're building our products and services to enhance the security outcomes that we deliver. And I think a lot of this is what I've just talked about. So I'll pick up a few different ones. The 24/7, that's across labs, across our MDR team, across the analysts that you'd work with, across managed risk. So if you're running a 9 to 5, knowing that Sophos has round the clock, follow the sun model for its XOps organization is reassuring to ensure that we're staying ahead as well as we can of the threats and the adversaries out there. At the bottom left, the intellect service. So the ability in real time to look up potentially suspicious, malicious IP addresses, URLs, files, these new things, and then either statically or dynamically, that means in a sandbox, analyzing the intent. So if we get that patient 0 and we see something is malicious, not only does it allow us to better protect that first patient, but it feeds in virtuous cycle. It feeds into the detection engineering we have to then go and support those other 30,000 plus MDR customers or 600,000 customers globally. And then industry standards, just talking about, our MITRE ATT&CK framework and MITRE ATT&CK mappings, trying to stay ahead and current with industry standards, secure by design. These are all so important, and XOps is great at leading the charge in doing that. So that wasn't everything. I'm sure I've left things off that you've got questions about. We've got Well, I've got time, so if people have questions, James, I don't know if there are any already that have come in that you want to go through. Please type them in now if you haven't already, and I'm happy to answer where I can as much. Let's try and keep it Sophos related. Otherwise, I'll do my best to answer any questions you have.
The most complicated generative AI questions coming in now. No, I've got one that I think is a good place to start whilst we let people feed some in, and that was asked earlier. It's around the cloud optics integration with the MDR service. Obviously, it's on the matrix. I suppose it's a question of what integrations, so what that integration is used for, I suppose. But I think one of the questions I was speaking to a customer this morning who's an MDR customer about this is is how much data do you need from an Azure environment? Because obviously that's where most people are going, right? Going kind of serverless or as much, SaaS on IaaS as much as possible. But it means that the natural kind of protections from an NDR point of view, where you would have had kind of networks to monitor, becomes less and less. It's more software you're looking at. So from a Sophos point of view, is kind of having cloud optics, if you're an Azure AWS customer, kind of quite critical to give that kind of visibility into that side of the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And more than happy to spend time with that customer and go into detail. So yeah, whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, the insight that cloud optics gives, it becomes like the others you saw on the slide. Let me, I don't know if my slides will play ball because they weren't updating, as you said, James, but if we come right back to the beginning and the integrations, the ability to pull in from cloud optics, it's the cloud icon here, it's CDR, cloud detection and response, and it's in beta at the moment. But anyone that's using cloud optics should be in that beta. It gives us insight, whether it's the anomaly detections, whether it's things like impossible logon, all of the different capabilities that we have in optics provides the potential to raise a detection within MDR that the MDR team will go and investigate and respond to. So like the examples we saw with Microsoft 365, the same idea. If you've got the telemetry coming from your Azure environment through cloud optics or your AWS environment through cloud optics, it's just another indicator. To use this diagram, it's another indicator, it's another event source that feeds in that we can contextualize and correlate to help us more quickly identify, i.e. detect, more quickly investigate, and more quickly respond to those threats.
It removes that kind of blind side, isn't it? Because otherwise you just have that big blind spot where you go, yeah, it's in Azure or it's in AWS, but actually what's in there, what's going on, that's some of those indicators of compromise, indicators of attack will start in that environment, won't they? So
yeah, I've not mentioned Shadow IT today yet, so here's my first call for Shadow IT.
That's a bingo card.
Thank you. But yeah, platform public cloud is still quite a grey area for many organizations. Who really is spinning it up? Is it actually the IT team? Whereas if you think physical devices, they go through procurement, an IT team, there's an image they're built to. It's too easy still today in 2025. There you go, James. It is still 2025. It's too easy to allow individual engineering teams to spin up workloads in AWS and Azure, to spin up infrastructure as code, and then the rest of the organization be blind to that activity. So fully agree.
The other question that I had was around the managed risk piece in terms of the kind of what a lot of people always ask the question around is the difference between what you guys are doing with Tenable and managed risk versus whether they should be doing it themselves. And I think that if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but the big value is that you've got people looking at that data, right? If you do Tenable yourself, the responsibility of looking at that data sits with the IT team, looking at the information, whereas when it's managed risk, you guys are looking at that, right? You're managing it. It's not just, oh, here's a load of data, go and decipher this.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll use the opportunity to be a bit mean about some other providers out there. Some of them are alert collectors, and they will collect alerts and then tell you these are all the alerts we've collected for you. The difference with managed risk, as you allude to, is and this is why Tenable love the tie-in that we've got, is it's managed by Sophos team. It's 24/7 managed. That baselining session I talked about, the questions that the team ask about what we've identified that's publicly available, what we've identified that you as an organization has as an attack surface, is the first and most important benchmarking. the example I gave, that allowed a company to go and shut down an exposure that they had or a potential exposure they'd had for many years. So first of all is that visibility. Understand what you own, agree between the Sophos managed risk team and your organization what that attack surface truly looks like. Once you've got that in place, then it's about that continual monitoring. So it's a partnership. I'll be completely honest, it's about having the expertise on the Sophos side, working with you who own the assets to understand how to prioritize those threats and then how to remediate them. And it's that partnership is the reason it works really well. And it's why, candidly, we've mandated that at the moment, certainly, that it's part of the managed risk team and not the self-managed option within Sophos, because it does need that level of expertise to help you work through. I think we've all seen examples of products that tell you that you've got 20,000 vulnerabilities. How do you sort through that and how do you deal with them? You need experts that work with you to go through and say, this is the list that we've prioritized, but also this is the list that we've focused on for you. So rather than it being tens or hundreds, it may be a very small number of exposures that you need to go and deal with.
Awesome. The final question that I got sent through was around the AI question, which I always loathe seeing AI questions, but I can see where they're coming from, which is, does Sophos continue to see there being an investment from your end in kind of generative AI? And I know what you've already done and you showed with the integration into kind of the case development. Do you think that sort of generative AI is going to continue to be something you invest in as part of the kind of product set? Or do you think, like some other companies, are kind of launching their own sort of standalone Gen AI product and trying to sort of make out that they're a security Gen AI product, but I don't think that's a Sophos play, right? I think that's a bit of a strange place to head to.
Yeah, indeed. So what I would say is we're very measured with everything we do. So if you go back to 2017 and artificial intelligence, AI is always about the data it's trained on. And the reason the Sophos artificial intelligence in the endpoint is so effective is it was trained on tens of millions of endpoints across hundreds of thousands of customers. That allows it to become as effective as it was. Generative AI is no different. If it's got the right training set, then the questions you ask it are going to be more and more refined. The thing I caution people about is who's using it. The generative AI we've used at Sophos has been used with the Sophos MDR team for over a year, because they're the experts that understand how to interpret it. And I'll give a very quick example, conscious of time. You'll see a clip online of someone that says that you can code a computer game using generative AI. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand the code well enough to see where it makes errors and where it needs to be fixed, then you won't be able to use Gen AI to code a computer game. But if you understand the area in which you're working with it well enough, you can see where it needs nudging in the right direction. You can see where it's made a genuine mistake and correct it. So yes, we're fully invested in it. We will look to use off-the-shelf LLMs where they're able to be effective enough to empower the Sophos staff who run MDR or our customers who use our products, until a point where we have our own AI that is more effective, in which case we might choose to use AI that we've generated ourselves.
Which makes complete sense, right? The right way to do it. I suppose on that note, I suppose it's perfect timing. Stephen, thank you very much for your time. It's been really beneficial, and I'm hoping that everyone's found it really useful. For everyone that has joined, we do these every quarter. I cannot remember the date of the next one, but you will get an email about it, and your account manager will reach out, and I will remember the date for the next one. But it goes without saying, it's been a great conversation, and thank you for everything you've shared. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you all.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great one.